barrier for you in first or second year is to be able to envision how the first months after school can look like and how you can begin your professional career. So we chose 3 different alumni from different cohorts and with different media expertise. And we'll start with Freya Pratty, who is currently in London, right?
Yeah, exactly. Nice to see you all.
So you may start, Freya.
Cool. Yeah, so I will talk through the steps I took after uni, I guess. I immediately after finishing the joint masters, I did the Bloomberg grad scheme in London for 3 months, where I was covering emerging markets and UK politics, which was a great learning experience. They give you 2 weeks training at the start where you run through like markets and financial training really in depth, which was very, very useful. And then at the end of that, I joined Sifted, which was set up by the Financial Times tech editor, and it's owned by the Financial Times. The idea behind Sifted is to write about European tech in the same depth as a lot of publications cover Silicon Valley with. So that's kind of what we think of as our USP. And I joined when Sifted was very young. It had been started by the FT a year earlier. I heard about it, I think, because Marie Mawad had been helping them out as well at the very early stages. And I chose to join Sifted because, in contrast to somewhere like Bloomberg, which I also think is a great place to work, but I wanted somewhere small where you can quickly progress and get responsibility. And also they allowed me to like live back in Paris for a bit and then live in London. So the flexibility you get from joining something young and the title changes and progression and promotion you get from joining somewhere small is what I have enjoyed. So I've now been at Sifted for 5 years, and through that I have gradually become more focused on running our investigations. So I edit other reporters on investigations into tech companies, which tends to fall into things like product isn't as good as it looks, big culture problem at a company, or increasingly it's investigations into how AI works, which has been a cool movement to follow the kind of recent AI bubble. And it has made me thankful that I got into tech, because I think bigger publications than Sifted are realizing that it's something they need to deepen their coverage of. So we're in quite a nice position at the moment. And yeah, I can talk, that's kind of my story post uni, but I can talk through more particular parts of it or answer questions. I don't know what's most helpful.
Do you have questions so far, maybe to make it dynamic? Yes. Just introduce yourself.
I don't know if you can see me. Hi, I'm Clara, and I'm in the Joint Masters. I'm in the first year, and I'm from Poland. So kind of the first question that cropped up in my mind is how to kind of find the right new newsroom. You know, Sifted started fresh. You were at the very beginning of it. So how did you know that it was like the right place to be? Because, well, there are so many. I mean, I think of like new newsrooms, like new magazines, kind of like startups. You know, they can be successful, but then they can fail, or they can, you know, just tread along and, you know, be very well read and so on. So again, how did you know that it was like the right one?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think you're obviously like, I took a bet on Sifted working out, and the reward you get is you're at somewhere from the early days, so you become senior quickly, but the risk is obviously that the place doesn't manage to work out its business model. I think the backing of the FT and the editor coming from there was something that there was credibility coming from that. That I was convinced by. They'd also brought a load of editors and reporters over from the FT. So although it's a small newsroom, it had this link to a much bigger and wealthier institution. I also early on and like continuously through working here try to ask some questions about the business model, and I've been satisfied with the answers. But I think that's something that when I was at uni, I wasn't as clued up on. That's something since I've tried to get clued up on. I think journalists need to be able to look at some figures and like run rate of the outlets they're looking at working for, and ask in your interviews, ask some tricky questions on like, what's your run rate? When did you make layoffs? These kind of questions that help you work out if the business model, if they've worked out their business model and if it's making some money. And I was satisfied by those answers. And I think even if you're joining somewhere bigger, they're good questions to ask. And does the business model make sense? Do they have a revenue stream that you see as being something that's going to continue? Yeah, just ask those financial questions, which I think I was a bit scared to ask at first because I see that as something that sits under commercial rather than editorial, but actually the journalists need to understand it as well, would be my answer.
Hi, I don't know if you can see, I think I'm probably out of the camera.
No, I
but,
can see you, I can see you.
Okay, cool. My name's Hannah. I'm also in the joint masters in first year. And I had a question about how much experience you had in the tech sector before joining like a European tech publication. I think like I don't know, when you're first starting out, we're all probably going to be applying to lots of different places, but realistically, like how much experience and knowledge of this sector should we have, or like did you have when you were joining this publication?
I had none, and I think that the way I was able to get the job was because I was taking a punt on something young. So now when I see reporters we're hiring at the moment and in the interviews, because Sifted's older and more established, the caliber and the experience people are coming with is a lot higher than what I came in with because I took this risk on a younger publication. So it's also the advantage of joining something smaller. You can get a job there often without the backing behind you. But we've also found that the best reporters we've had don't come in with tech knowledge. I think we want people who are just really, really great reporters, and I think that's transferable across sectors. That was also when I was at Bloomberg for the grad scheme, that was also their ethos. They were like, we don't need you to be an expert in like, I was covering like the Russian ruble. I didn't know anything about it. They were like, we don't care. We can train you on that. We just want you to be like an outstanding reporter. So I think I would, and that's how Sifted thinks about hiring. We're now in a position where more people want to work for us than when I joined because we weren't very well known. So we can now pick from people with tech expertise, but we still always prioritize, like we want someone who's just really great and gets scoops across whatever beat they're on. We'd rather have that transferable skill than someone that doesn't get any scoops but knows a lot about tech, for example. But yeah, that's again an advantage of joining something young and small is you can come in perhaps without the full experience that you might need to if you join that publication 5 years later. There are also ways, and I'm sure you guys are doing this, to build that expertise. I could have been focusing more on tech at Sciences Po. Like you guys could, there's also ways to do that before you get to those first job applications, I think.
Another question for Freya? Okay, do you want to continue on can you hear me? Maybe on your daily routine as a news editor, what you do, what kind of stories do you cover, what does your routine look like?
Yeah, so I think it's probably the format lots of newsrooms follow. We have a call at 9:15, so it gives us a bit of a buffer to think about what we want to pitch that day. And then we have a call where we go around all the reporters and we say what we're working on for that day. And then the day is usually split into chasing scoops, which for us is normally a deal that's about to happen with one of the big European tech companies. So at the moment, it's a lot of what Mistral is doing, for example. So I will normally spend the morning trying to like double source some scoops and get them out. And then the afternoon is normally dedicated to longer form stuff. So these like investigation-y type pieces, which I'll work on from like 2 weeks to sometimes like 3 months, is normally how I like to split out the day. And then it's a lot of going out and having coffees and lunches and dinners with sources and events. Sifted is very good, I think, in comparison to some newsrooms in letting us prioritize that kind of work. The ethos is very much time away from the desk is the most important. So a lot of my day is, meeting sources and getting a tip and trying to find someone else that can confirm it and publish it. That tends to be how the day goes. I can't remember the second part of your question, sorry.
It was about the routine and maybe something about how do you work with other correspondents or tech journalists, because you need to go first and to have the best sources, but how does it work on the ground?
Yeah, so
In the
we
field.
I'm in London, half our reporters are in London, and then half of them are dotted around different European countries. So we tend to, like, if I get a tip about Mistral doing something, I'll pair up with our Paris reporter, for example. Tends to be like who gets the tip and then who's got the contact book to boost that side of the deal that we need to kind of double source it from. And I was doing a lot of climate tech reporting. A lot of that's happening in the Nordics. So I was pairing up with our Swedish reporter a lot. So it tends to just be whoever comes in with the tip will then pair them up with the right reporter whose contact book matches the kind of source we need to back that up. And then on investigations, it's a similar process. It's like someone's got a tip. Where's the company based? What sector is the company in? Like we've got some reporters who are really good at technical AI work, so they might pair up if it's a story on an AI company, for example. So we do a lot of bylined work, a lot more than some publications. I think we're happy with like 3 or 4 people on a byline, whereas I know some places are limited to 2. So we are often just like pulling in whoever we think has the right contact book to get a story done, is typically how it works.
Questions, someone? Maybe one last question for you, Freya. What kind of tip would you give to current students to get their first job, even if they're not looking for tech positions? But what kind of tips do you have of advice?
When I'm just thinking, because we're doing a lot of hiring at the moment, it's interesting being on this side of it and like the interviewer side of it. At the moment, this is probably what everyone says to you. We want people that can bring skills that the editors don't have. So at the moment, we want people that can do short form video and film it on their phones. And we all feel quite like old and that we're not the right people to do that. So we want younger reporters to come in and teach us something. So if you've got an edge in that way where you're like at an advantage to your editors because you're more equipped with these, is it like podcasting or short form video or like data skills? Like if you can come in and tell your editors in the interview something that they can't do, they're going to be like immediately very impressed. And then in my Bloomberg interviews, I remember, so it was obviously a business publication, but the reporting that I was talking them through was about when I'd done my like internship in Lebanon, nothing to do with business reporting, but they just want to see that you're able to break news no matter what beat and what form. So I would just think about what are your like how can you best portray that you were the first at something in some way, even if it's not related to the expertise the beat that you're trying to get a job in. And I would encourage, when I was at uni, I wasn't thinking of myself at all as a business reporter, but I have learned to really love it because I think actually it touches everything and it's about like crazy people and crazy power, and it's actually really interesting. I think I had this impression that it was like figures and banking, and it's really not, and it's increasingly exciting because AI is becoming everything. So I would also encourage you to think about other forms of reporting that you hadn't thought of maybe are within your skill set. And business reporting is also one of the better paid. There's more jobs because the business model behind business reporting is easier. So I would encourage people that don't think that they're a financy business reporter to think about it, because it's a great way to like write stories that challenge big, powerful people and companies, and actually it can fulfill some of the ambitions I had that I thought would have to go through other forms of reporting, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Or maybe we can switch to real life person. You can take this one.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes. We'll start continue with Aurore, if that's fine for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, does it work?
Yes,
it works. So my name is Aurora, if it's easier to pronounce for the English speakers. I graduated about a year and a half ago, so it's not that long ago. I graduated in June 2024, so I still remember what it was like kind of being at this moment in time for you guys in the program. I was really stressed out. I was terrified I wouldn't find a job. My imposter syndrome was kind of running wild. So I get it, I've been there, I survived. So I hope I can bring some reassurance and answer some of you guys' questions. A little bit about me. So I graduated in June 2024, and I immediately started as a freelancer. I was lucky enough to start with NewsGuard. Have you guys ever heard of, you guys have heard of NewsGuard, probably. So I had contacted them because I wanted to do their internship over the summer, and they told me no. So the first thing that I did was obviously be very disappointed, and then I emailed them back and I told them, can I be a freelancer? And they told me yes. So even if somebody tells you no, you can always kind of push back. It worked in this case for me, and I worked for them for about a year, and then they had to let go of all of their freelancers because various reasons, the big one being Trump. Oh, they're doing it? Okay, great. So I worked for them for about a year, and around a month before graduation, I got a call from France 24, and they asked me if I wanted to come in, do an interview, maybe pass some tests, and maybe start as a freelancer for them as well. And I passed the test, and I started immediately as an assistant producer. I know I had contacted France 24 about a couple of weeks after Career Day. I think you guys have Career Day soon. I had contacted them immediately after. They never responded. So another thing, sometimes they don't respond, but they will contact you later. She specifically told me I usually wait for students to be done with school before I contact them. And that's exactly what happened in my case. So during graduation, I was actually already training for France 24's program. And so I worked as a freelancer for France 24 and NewsGuard, kind of just putting the two together. I was doing day shifts at France 24, night shifts, morning shifts, and then whenever I had some extra time off, I would work for NewsGuard. I was also working a little bit as a translator for the BBC, and I did that for about a year and a half. I also worked a bit for The Local. I don't know if you guys have heard, it's a little bit more niche. It's this little online news outlet that covers French news, but also French bureaucracy. And I worked for them a little bit as well, and up until a few months ago, and both France 24 and them actually offered me a full-time job. So I was very lucky to be able to choose, and I chose France 24, which was surprising because I always thought that I would hate television. I was really bad at video reporting. I was always the worst of my class, like literally bottom tier every single time. Even though I struggled and I actually tried to put in the effort, never worked. But still, now I'm actually working in television, and I actually do a lot of video reporting. I do a lot of video editing, and I think the skills that I learned at Stilspo did help, no matter how bad I was at it. So I think you can always kind of push through, even if you think you're going to suck at it. Oftentimes, newsroom, when they pick young people, they know that you're not like fully. I had to learn the software at France 24, for example. They didn't use Premiere Pro. I think you guys still learn on Premiere Pro. We use Avid. So I had to learn Avid, start over from scratch. But still, what I learned actually did help to make sure that I was not publishing crazy stuff. And surprisingly, I initially started doing this thinking like, oh, I want to be a writer. I don't really care about television. I'll just do this to financially sustain myself. And now here I am. I actually discovered that I really liked it. I loved how dynamic it was. I loved being in a newsroom, doing a lot of teamwork. I love being in the middle of breaking news. That's actually really fun. There's a very fun element to being in a television newsroom, I think. I think writing can be a little bit more on your own, but I was still doing that on the side as a freelancer. So that's one of the things that's great about freelancing, is you can do a little bit of everything whenever you have time. Financially, it can be very sustainable if you add television, for sure, because they desperately need freelancers all the time. So, little tip. And now I'm doing it full time, and it's going very well. I'm now training to be a producer, so that's also one of the things about English newsrooms, especially in Paris, especially for France 24. They don't have a lot of very good English speakers, so when you are one, they really try and push you to kind of gravir les échelons, as the French would say, to climb the ladder. So yeah, hopefully that's concise. I'm running on 2.5 hours of sleep, so I'm sorry. Yeah, if you guys have any questions. I'm just going to drink this.
Maybe what is your current job
Oh, yeah. So my current job right now, I work for La Matinale, which is the morning show, very early morning show. So we run from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And my job is to basically prepare all of the images that you're going to see during the JT, so the live bulletin. So I work with the presenter, the editor-in-chief, and the producer. The producer is the one who decides what topics we're going to cover. The presenter is the one who writes the scripts, goes live on air. And I'm the one in the background putting up all of the images that you're going to see and a lot of tiny other little gritty details that I don't really have time to get into. But you're working with a conducteur, so it's all a bit very technical. I was not a technical person. I was terrified when I first started doing this job. I thought I was going to be bad at it because it wasn't my thing. But I do think sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone can definitely help you learn about yourself, help you figure out what you actually like. I had done 2 internships during my gap year, one with BBC and one with CNN. And they had kind of showed me that I liked television. I thought it was fun, but I also wasn't really sure that I could find a job in it, and I wasn't sure that I was actually very good at it. But I think having those opportunities kind of fall onto me and me just taking them and grabbing them kind of taught me a lot more about who I was as a journalist. I realized that as much as I liked writing, I hated writing about French bureaucracy. And I preferred being in the midst of a newsroom covering international relations, conflicts, AI summits, whatever. I preferred that over writing about topics that I didn't care. And as a freelancer, I was still able to write feature stories whenever I had an idea in mind, which I thought was it gave me a lot more leeway and a lot more freedom to write the stuff that I actually wanted to write and not just write for the sake of writing. Yeah, and I refused the logo. But they're great. They're actually a really nice newsroom. I just didn't like French bureaucracy. As a French person, I found it really tedious. I think if you're not French, it's actually very helpful.
Hi, thanks. How long did it, so you started out, let's say, like as a freelancer at France 24. How many days were you freelancing there, and was it already kind of a hint that you could, say that that was your like stable freelance position for now, and that you could freelance on the side? How long did that take? Like, were there? Because it's really nice that you're reassuring. It's actually like super great to hear. How long was like the period between like graduation and when you could sense that you had something that was stable enough for you to be like standing straight, kind of? Yeah.
Fair. No, that's a good question. I would say almost immediately. When I started working for NewsGuard about a month before I started working for France 24, and I quickly realized that it was really not going to be enough to survive financially. France 24 was immediately. I had tons of shifts. I actually had to start saying no. Because I was given too many shifts, and I had shifts at very odd hours, and so I was not really sleeping, and also I was working during the weekend, so I wasn't really seeing my family or friends. So the good thing about television is they do need people, so you will be given a lot of shifts as soon as you step in. The training sessions that they do to kind of teach you the software, how a conducteur, I have no idea how you say conducteur in French, we all use conducteur even in English. They tell you, like they teach you how to make it, how it works. That's also paid for. Yeah. So that was immediately, I was way more financially stable. And then occasionally, since I was also freelancing with BBC pays pretty well as a freelancer, even as a translator. So highly recommend. And I had done a full year with 2 very long internships, so I kind of wanted to try to freelance as soon as I could. I think for me, it worked. If I had just had NewsGuard, it wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have had enough money or enough experience. France 24 immediately gave me so many shifts that it was almost kind of like an internship. I was really working there full time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my second question is more about France 24, but are you working in the French section or the English section, or is it kind of permeable? Can you go between the two easily?
So they hired me initially for the Anglophone channel. But since I'm French, when they needed people in the French channel, they put me in the French channel as well. So I very quickly started working for both. In news, I would do shifts in the French channel and then the English channel, and then there are some what they call magazines, which are pre-recorded TV shows that they do with they're more feature story kind of. That's the vibe that they're giving, at least. Those usually are bilingual, so I was working for them as well. So at France 24, you can definitely use and hone your skills and kind of shift between the two. They're not at all. If they need you, they'll take you. Like, it's really the vibe. And also, you get better pay if you work for both.
Thank you.
Maybe we can shift to Andrei and come back to the question for Aurore. Okay, Andrei, can we listen to you?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So I am currently based in Bucharest, and I just moved here like a month ago. But I used to live in Senegal for 3 years, where I was working as a freelancer. So what happened for me after Sciences Po was that we graduated during the pandemic, so we basically back home to Romania. It was in 2020, and I think from I think July was it, or August, until January, I stayed with my parents, and I started pitching a lot of my articles from class in Sciences Po. I was starting to freelance, basically. That was my objective. So what I did was, like, by staying with my parents for those months, it was lockdown anyway. I was saving a lot of money on rent and expenses, and then I could pitching stuff. I started publishing, I think, two of my articles from my third year that I worked on. I published them in Vice, which doesn't exist anymore. And then I started pitching other ideas from kind of Romania, because it was very good for the beginning to go back to a place that kind of, and that there weren't many people who were freelancing for international media from there. So there was like a space for me to do that. The unique kind of position, because I spoke the language, I was from there, but then I understood the international media landscape well, to be able to pitch and like write stories. So I mainly focus on writing, but then I take photos and video, and I do audio and stuff like that. But the majority of my work is writing. So in January, so what's like maybe 5 months after, I moved out of my parents and I moved into my own place. And that's when I started to get some kind of more steady contracts. First, whilst kind of doing freelance writing on the side, which doesn't really pay that much, maybe like around 500 euros per kind of a shorter article, and maybe more for, but you can't really, the time that it takes to report and publish and get paid is too long for you to be able to make a monthly living. So you always need to have a bit something on the side. So as I was getting, I was publishing more and more. I think in months I published maybe like 7 or 8 articles. I used all that money to buy equipment, like video and photo and radio equipment. And then I got a contract with Aurore Europe, which at the time was trying to like an audio podcast. Aurore Europe was founded by students from the joint masters, actually. I reached out to them. Now it's more of like a studio, but it used to be like a magazine of Europe, and they wanted to do more podcasts. They don't really have jobs now, and they don't do that much kind of journalism. So I started doing podcasts for them. They got a grant with the Europeans podcast, which is this podcast about Europe. So then I started working for the Europeans as well. So I had this like gig of like 2 days a week where I was editing podcasts, and then I was producing stories for them, my own stories for them. So this helped me kind of get a steady kind of income alongside my freelance writing. Then I also, what I did was that I emailed a lot of kind of people. I applied to all the internships, I applied to all the jobs, thing worked, but I started emailing a lot of small media as well. And I started working like that with Lighthouse Reports, which is this investigative kind of outlet that kind of does investigations and then publishes them in partnership with other media. and they were working a lot on human rights violations and on like denial of asylum at the European borders at the time, and they weren't really like no one was really covering at the time. And after we had a few discussions, they were like, okay, I pitched them some ideas. They were like, not so interesting, but we'll pay you for you to be able to get proof that people at the Romanian Serbian border are getting denied asylum. I was like, okay, so I'm saying this as like a proof that being like I had something unique to provide, which was I was based in Romania. I already reached out to them, kind of knew me who I was. They saw that I published a few articles before, and they were like, okay, do this for us. So if I would have stayed in France or if I would have went to London, probably I wouldn't be in that position. So it was really helpful to go back to Romania, even though I didn't really want to. So I was in Romania like a year and a half, doing this combination of like freelance articles that I was pitching to international media. I was doing Lighthouse for a year, and then the Our Europe and Europeans podcasts. And then I was also editing videos for this NGO in France that a friend of mine put me in touch with, and I was doing like literally just editing some conferences and stuff like that. So together with all of this, I had contracts for I think like 7 days a week or something. I could make like a living, quite good living. I think I earned the most maybe in that year since I've started working. And after that, I also got a news shift gig with the Middle East Eye through one of my colleagues who was a student at in my year. So he went on to work for Middle East Eye in London, and then he told me like we're looking for news writers for freelance shifts. After I finished my gig with Lighthouse and I finished my gig with the Europeans and Our Europe, who ran out of money, I got this other one. So I was balancing these two. I replaced the two other gigs. This one, and then the war in Ukraine started, and I was in Romania. I was actually planning. So this was 2022. I was planning on moving to Dakar to freelance there after like a year and a bit in Romania. And then the war in Ukraine started, so I delayed my departure to Dakar, and I stayed for another like 8 months in Romania because it was such a big event, and I was there, and again, uniquely positioned to cover this. So I started covering the war for Al Jazeera and the Middle East Eye. I was working a lot in Moldova and Romania. Again, everyone was in Ukraine, but very few people were actually there at the border to look at the refugees coming, to look at the security situation. I went to Transnistria and all these places to be able to kind of cover this, kind of the edges of the war. And yeah, after that, I started working. I moved to Dakar because I wanted to kind of report internationally and kind of do a bit of a change of scenery. And like being in Romania was never necessarily the plan. So I moved to Dakar without like much setup. I knew one person there. I found accommodation, and then I had some savings, and then I set up camp there, and I started to pitch things and travel and so on. So that was for the past 3 years. I've started. So now I'm mainly focusing on investigations and kind of some reportage, like foreign correspondence type of reportage. I've done a lot of like collaborative investigations as well, through Lighthouse reports, but then also through these European grants, the IJ for the Journalism Fund grants, which give money to cross-border teams to cover certain topics. Started applying for a lot of those fellowships, and so on. So starting from the beginning, when I was also doing some video editing, after maybe like 3 years, I was only doing kind of investigations and writing, some audio as well, and some video work, but not a lot. So I managed to transition, in a couple of years to actually just doing fully reporting and fully kind of more of the stuff I wanted to do. And now, I just moved back to Bucharest a month ago, actually. So I was for 3 years in Senegal, and I wanted to change a bit. And I went to I want to move to another country to start again from scratch, because these be quite the ability, like it's quite tough to adjust and so on. So I was like, I'm gonna come back to Romania for now, and I'll be here for a while until I figure out what I'm doing, whether I'm going somewhere else, maybe Lebanon, Istanbul. I'll see. I think, yeah, overall, this was my kind of since graduating.
Questions for Andrei?
Hi, thank you so much. I just had a question about the grants, because usually we hear that as young journalists it's kind of hard to get them, and it's usually like bigger outlets because they also struggle with financing their work. So can you just talk us a bit more through how you got your grant and the whole process? Thank you so much.
So there's several types of grants. There are these like cross-border grants that you have to apply. J4U and Journalism Fund are the biggest funds for investigative journalism, mainly in Europe, and they give you have to be at least 2 countries, and the story needs to have cross-border relevance, and 2 media in 2 countries and 2 journalists in 2 countries at least, and then you can get some anywhere from like 20 to 50K for the whole team and for the whole investigation, euros, and they're really good, but it's not something that I got from the beginning. I think my first grant, like first of these grants, I got like a year and a half ago or something. So maybe after like 3-4 years of work, and after applying maybe 2 or 3 times and getting rejected, I started getting these bigger ones. But then before that, I used to get a lot of these like ships that helped me a lot, that kind of fund the production of one article for yourself. So there's Balkans Investigative Reporting Network that give out this fellowship for excellence or something, for journalistic excellence it's called, and they fund stories from Central and Eastern Europe from journalists there to be written in like magazine English language. There are a number of other let me just have a look, a number of other ships that give basically this type of funding, and they're not so big and so popular. It's not, you don't have like thousands of journalists of Europe applying for them. I got, for example, like how's it called, like a radio residency in Ramallah in Palestine, which was funded by the Goethe German Cultural Institute there, to bring like someone who works with sound, like an audio, to do a sort of project, and I pitched them. So there's a lot of stuff out there that give funding, not necessarily just these big investigative collaborative ones, but then there's smaller ones. I got a grant from the UN Foundation to go to Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and like report on polio and on public health and infectious diseases. And then when I arrived, I got another grant from this American reporting institute to report on external EU borders in Africa, funding of and militarization of borders in Africa. Just a few examples. Last year I got one from like a South African foundation for journalists. So it's really kind of depends on, and of course these, you have to figure out basically when you have enough in your portfolio, when apply and how to argue. And I think people want to see that you have a good story rather than you have like loads of experience. You need to have some experience. I think in your first year work you might like huge financing, but like it doesn't hurt to apply with a good story. But they're not super sustainable, but if you play your cards right, like the way I do it is that I apply maybe for like 10 a year, and I get like 2 or 3, and they fund more than half of my kind of yearly income. And then sometimes, like last year I applied with one story for 3, so I got like 3 grants for one story, and I think I ended up with like 17,000 euros for the same story, which was like huge to do and more work. But there's like ways to be strategic about applying for the same story to multiple grants, because it's more complicated and expensive. Finding all these little opportunities. For me in Romania now, I see there's a bunch of like 1,000 euro grants for a bunch of stuff as well. So I think what's important is that you should apply even though you get rejected, because you develop this muscle to apply for these things. To make a list and have all these newsletters and follow all these pages on LinkedIn, Twitter, everywhere, to be able to get to be up to date to whatever opportunities for funding there are. And yeah, I mean, it takes a bit until you kind of build the portfolio and the credits maybe to get some of these grants. But then I think the idea is the most important, and showing that you can do it and doing a bit of reporting before you apply for them and stuff. I hope that helps.
Hello, I was wondering how easy it is to change countries and to settle in a country for 3 years and then to move to another one and find a job every time. How was your experience with that?
So, I studied in London before. I did Sciences Po, and then I came to for 3 years, and I came to Paris for 2, moved back to Romania for like a year, and then went to Dakar. So moving around is not really like, I've done it basically from Romania to London, London, Paris, Paris, Dakar. I guess as journalists, you kind of get used to, changing, and it depends on what type of work you do. I wanted to cover international topics, do human rights and conflict reporting. For someone like Freya who covers like business and tech, it's better to be in a hub that covers, or if you cover, I don't know. For me, I wanted to go in the field and kind of report on these crisis development, human rights, and all that stuff. It's like a big move. Every time you move somewhere, you have to figure out everything about that country, the context, the cultural context, logistically, from like getting internet accommodation to figuring out who are the editors for that specific. Like when I moved from Europe, I was working with a lot of Europe editors, and then I moved to Senegal. I had to make connections with Africa editors, which meant finding who they and pitching them stories, figuring out what type of stuff. But often in a lot of, there's like some journalists hub around the world, which include Dakar, Nairobi, like Rio as well in Brazil, Johannesburg or Cape Town. In Europe, there's a bunch of journalists, but I think outside of Europe, there's all these hubs, Singapore as well a bit, where you have like freelance journalists and people around the world who are journalists. So you have this kind of network of freelancers that once you arrive, it's quite easy to kind of in, and then you get a lot of tips in terms of, your professional, how to do things. Like, for example, in Dakar, I met like a bunch of my friends were freelance journalists as well, or staff correspondents. So sometimes I would work with the Washington Post correspondent there. Sometimes I would work with the freelance photographer, and we would go as like, okay, let's go to Sudan together, apply for a grant, pitch stories. And so you get this network of kind of journalists that make it a bit easier to figure out how things work. But you have to work and like read, and I think it fits a certain type of personality, or you have to be willing to, go like start making connections and friends, and then to figure out everything about that country, from like how do you get a press accreditation, how do you there's a lot of things, and it can be quite difficult. I think for me, even now moving to Bucharest, I've never lived before in Bucharest. I'm from up north in Romania, but it's still my country, and even now it's like there's an adjustment period for me here to figure out things and get settled. But this type of, like, I know a lot of people who, and especially big correspondents and big media, they get like 3-4 year stints in a place, and then they move around to other bureaus around the world, and they have to do the same thing. They just have more institutional support, but it's tough, and it takes a bit of time to get accustomed to the place. But everything's possible.
Back to the questions for Aurore.
Hi, I'm Stanislav. Just a quick question about kind of the nature of work at France 24. Are there any, let's say, positions at France 24 that focus specifically on text, or like if you apply there, you have to be prepared to kind of do both?
No, when I did my interview with them, initially they asked me, do you prefer text or television? And I said text because I preferred text at the time. The only issue is there's way less opportunities in text. They already have so many people. So it's, if you want to be sustainable financially speaking, you might get a bit of some, what they call pige, so a bit of freelance work, but you might not get as many, so it might not be fully functional in terms of financial stability, I think. It also depends at what time you arrive, how many languages you speak. They do text in multiple different languages, so that can help as well. You can also do, as a freelancer, you can do television and text. The only issue is it's a little harder for them because television, it's every hour of the day, it's very odd hours. Text is just like a 9-to-5 job, so that it's a little bit more complicated. You also have jobs like you can work for radio, there's social media as well, there's podcasting, so there's very different outlets at France 24. It's a huge newsroom, so you can do very different things. There's Desk. Desk is obviously writing packages, so you're scripting, so that's another form of writing as well. So yeah, I decided when they kind of told me you might not be financially sustainable, I said, okay, I'll go in television then. I don't regret it, but it is definitely something that you have to think about, whether you're okay with doing that. In my case, I was fine with doing it because I was doing text for other people, other news outlets.
For Andrei or for all?
No, because she has a question for me. No, I don't. No, I'll give it back to you after.
Hey, thank you. So I have two questions. What kind of translations did you do for the BBC? And for France 24, did you have the meeting on the career day? And if so, what did you talk about? What did you say about yourself?
Okay. For the BBC, so I had done my internship with them. And so they saw very quickly that I could shift between French and English quite well. And so now most of the translation work that I do for them, I do it for their radio programs. I work a lot for their radio program called Witness History. And so what I do usually is the producer calls me and he's like, oh, we're interviewing this French person. Can you do the translation during the interview? And so that's what I do. I do kind of live translation, I guess. The producer asks questions, I translate them, I translate the answer that the person is giving. Sometimes I script out the entire interview for them so they can have it in written form. So that's mostly what I did. I did a little bit of writing for them as well. So they do take freelance work too, for text. And then your second question was Career Day. I did have an interview with Sophie Deben during Career Day. And I told her the same thing that I did during the second interview that I did with her, which was, I want to do text, I want to do digital, I do not want to work for television. But I think she was more interested in the fact that I spoke fluent French and fluent English. That was definitely kind of the skill set that she was very interested in, especially since I had also done 2 internships in production. So she knew I could kind of like shift between text and television without being completely lost. But for me, I was kind of really fixated on, I want to do text. She, I think in her brain, she was kind of like, oh, she can speak both languages really well. We can use her wherever. So I think the language skill set is definitely something. France 24 also has a Spanish channel and an Arabic channel. If you speak fluent Arabic, they will definitely use you everywhere because they are looking for a lot of people.
Yeah, I have a question for Andrei. I mean, maybe you mentioned this a little bit, but you've moved around quite a bit and you worked in different, let's say, geographical locations. How do you build credibility to report and freelance from those places? Like how do you go about this kind of, why are you the right person to tell this story? Does it just come down to the fact that your pitch has to be good enough? Or how do you go about this and how do you go about securing contacts in completely new places?
So I don't think an editor has ever asked me why you're the right person to cover this story. You need to prove yourself. Why your like gender, sexual orientation, or whatever is fit for like that's something that's very good for you to ask yourself as a journalist. But then once when you pick your topics and like be careful with your biases, you otherwise in terms of like if you have a good story and if you're there at the right place, that's all that. If you're good at what you do, and then if you have a good story, and then if you deliver it well and fairly and so on, I think that's the key of the job. And that includes a lot, obviously, your identity and whatever. And I think there's like a lot of issues and things that consider, you know, when you go around different places, you go in, you go out, you know, you might not know that about the country, but then you have an edge because journalists from there might get, you know, imprisoned, killed, or kidnapped for writing about those things, and then you have the little protection, go in, go out, and write about things that other journalists can't. In terms of getting kind of credibility, I mean, you know, a lot of the work I do is that I fund or I self-fund a lot of the trips that I do. For example, in last January, I went to Syria with a freelance photographer. It cost us like 1,500 euros for like 10 days with tickets and everything involved, translators and everything. We lived in like a small hotel, we shared beds, all that stuff. And then we published maybe like 5 or 6 articles from our trip, and then we made our money plus some profit. It's not like if I do these trips like every 2-3 months, I'm gonna lose money. But like if I want to cover the fall of Assad, I'll front up some money and go do it. And then either while I'm there, while I'm there and after, I calls or I send some emails to editors, especially the ones that I know and that I've worked with before. Look, I'm here. If I would be starting out, for example, I think if you go to a place and you spend a little money, you can make a lot of money, like a lot of money. You can make that money back by pitching stories from there because you're there, especially if you're. But I think in time, you know, I started working on like the Romanian border, where like police officers would like run after me, and I got like a case of like a police case for like illegally crossing the border. I got like a criminal file, whatever. I didn't, but you know, I did that in my kind of home turf, and then I moved on to other places. So I built that experience of like being like I wouldn't recommend to anyone go to Sudan like after they graduated or go to a place that's dangerous. But you know, you can go to places. For example, I was speaking to someone who is Hungarian and lives in London and wants to become a freelance journalist, and there's elections in Hungary in April. You need to be there and you need to pitch stories from there like a month before the elections. You need to reach out to correspondents and pitch them stories as well. So I think there's like that thing, like being aware of things, and they're small. Like I started covering stuff in Paris, and then I did the same internship as Freya in Lebanon, which also gave me a bit of kind of international experience. Then I started pitching stories from Europe, Romania. Then I went to Congo, and then moved to Senegal. Like slowly, you build certain kind of credibility. And I think something that quite useful for me was that I started submitting all my stuff for awards. And then, you know, at first I was like, no, there's no point in submitting because there's so many good ones. But then, you know, sometimes if it happens and you win some awards, these awards, first of all, they give you money. They give you some credibility when people look you up, and they'll be like, okay, you've done good stuff that was appreciated. So it's good to also, on top of fellowships, what I do a lot of the time is submit my work that I did in a year for awards, because you can get like 10,000 euros out of an award sometimes, or 5,000 euros, and that's money that you can use to live or like invest in other reporting. And then, you know, you have those nominations there, and you're like, okay, have a journalist who can do this type of job and can do it well, and this helps. I don't know if that answers your questions, but yeah.
It does. Thank you.
There we go.
I have a question for Aurore. because you told that at the beginning you were freelancing for NewsGuard and France 24 at the same time. So my question is, can you talk a bit more about that? And do you think it's ideal to like have different places you freelance for, or is it better to try to have one and then get into company?
To answer your second question, I was happier freelancing across different newsrooms simply because I wasn't sure I wanted to stay in television. I wanted to keep a foot in the text world because I really like writing. And NewsGuard had a bit of a investigative touch to it, so I thought that was very interesting. I really liked their mission. So I was just really happy kind of working for various newsroom. Also, France 24 is présentiel, like you have to be there, but NewsGuard was remote, BBC was remote. The articles that I pitched were, I sometimes went on the field, but I was still working from home mostly, so it was perfectly feasible to do all of that all at once. What was your first question?
No, it was, for you to talk a bit more about that.
I think it depends on your personality and if you're okay kind of working across different newsrooms. I liked being able to do television and do text and then do a little bit of podcasting. I thought it was good to keep one foot in everything so that I could stay kind of on par and still feel like I could bring something to a newsroom if there was one that I really wanted to stay in later on. And I do think newsrooms now really value if you have skills across the board. If you can say that you can write, but you can also script, you can also do a little bit of radio, if you can do a little bit of audio, I think that definitely helps to push your application forward, for example. But not everybody was doing that for me. Like, there are some people who have been freelancing at France 24 for television for years, and that's all they do, because they're perfectly fine just doing television. I wasn't. I liked still writing on the side. Yeah.
Thank you.
One final message for the student or those who are graduating?
Me or?
Yes.
Okay. One final message. I don't know. Hopefully, I was able to reassure you guys a little bit.
Yeah.
I know it's tough at this point in the program. Career Day is coming up, and obviously the Grand Tour and all of that. I know that can be very stressful. I was terrified out of my mind, mostly. My mom still recalls how bad it was. But I do think there are opportunities out there. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about any of the newsrooms that I talked to about. Yeah, I think you'll definitely make it. Everybody in my class made it. So we're all financially relatively stable.
Thank you, Andrei. Can I share your contacts with the students?
Of course, yeah. For me, the most important thing was that I learned was to never give up on pitching, sending applications, and really trying to do what I wanted. Like, never. There's so many barriers and challenges that you're gonna face if you prevent yourself from doing things, from like pitching and you say, "Oh, I can't do that. I won't apply for this award. I won't apply for that grant, or I won't like go to that country to do something." Like, obviously you will never be able to. So I think try everything you want. If you want to do an investigation, do it. If you want to do a series, do it. Like, yeah, don't put back to yourself and try to do everything, and like learn how to deal with failure and rejection, and then it's not that bad after the daily stuff, getting rejected and then you get accepted something.
Thank you,
It
Andrei.
works.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.